All right, so welcome to the Praxis Behind the Obscure podcast. And today I have a very special guest, Peter Mark Adams, and I've recently read his book. Let's see if it can pop up on the screen here. Yes, The Power of the Healing Field, Energy Medicine, Psi Abilities, and Ancestral Healing. And actually, you've been on my radar for a while because I interviewed Harper Feist of the Thelema Now podcast. And I asked her because she's interviewed so many people, right? There's hundreds and hundreds of episodes. Great interviewer, really like her style. But I asked, is there one guest that sort of changed how you think about magic and the occult and your approach? And she actually mentioned you. And she actually recommended, this is months ago, maybe even a year ago. She mentioned you should interview him. And so finally, a year later, we're here. So yeah,
here we are.
Yeah, exactly. And so, plus, just read your book, so great time to have you on. So, can you introduce yourself for the listeners, and how you got into spiritual and esoteric practices?
Okay. My name, Peter Mark Adams. Introduce myself. I'm a professional author and energy healer. I came quite late to energy healing, but I have roots in the martial arts in my teens. And as you may know, the energy body and the energy system is common to the martial arts and to healing, so that the two actually do overlap quite considerably. So taking that into account, I've been in energy work in one form or another for decades.
Very long time. Yeah.
Okay, but I only really came to energy healing quite late through my partner, Kenzie. She introduced me to Usui Reiki. And that was another insight. And from there, moved into a number of other healing modalities that gave fresh insight and understanding, so that it kind of rolled on from there, and been practicing these energy techniques for the past 25 years almost now.
Okay.
A large part of that has been professional. So I specialized, apart from doing Reiki, I mean, we are having Reiki shares 2 nights every week for like 3 or 4 years, and some of those nights there'd be like 2-3 beds fully in use, like 20 people coming, circulating. And on top of that, I was doing professional rebirthing breath work, which is kind of my speciality. And on top of that, a thing called Vivation, which developed out of rebirthing, but implemented a large measure of mindfulness within its technique. So there was a breathing and mindfulness approach to the resolution of emotional issues. So these 3 kind of were my area of speciality. And of course, inevitably, I learned EFT.
Okay.
Simply because it's the fastest, easiest, most effective way for dealing with any kind of emotional upset and physical pain and all kinds of things. It is, a true panacea. We can talk a little bit about the origins of that if you wish. I mean, it's kind of pervasive these days, I know that. But since you had a question about it, I thought let's deal with that one.
Yeah, for sure.
EFT, it evolved I think, out of a technique called thought field therapy that had been developed by Roger Callahan. And he developed that as part of his work in acupuncture. So Gary Craig was one of a number of people who took that training and found that the amount of elaboration around it could be cut down. And that's what Gary Craig essentially did. He cut the TFT down to its bare essentials, which is basically tapping the heads of the major meridians on the front of the body, starting mainly on the face. And from there, a whole wave of EFTs evolved. So, almost every country has an EFT of some form or other. A lot of them are branded with people's names and so on and so forth. But basically, it's tapping the meridians. Okay.
Like just physically with your finger, or are they using any tools? Because here in Korea, obviously, well, I mean, it's basically the same as China, but they utilize acupuncture and, you know, all the meridians and everything. So are they using basically that same map from here, from East Asia, and then they're physically tapping?
It is the acupuncture map.
Okay, interesting. But they're instead of using needles, they just physically tap.
Yeah, because if you've got an emotional upset or even a physical pain up, then you know, you can just manage it yourself in a very simple. I mean, these points here, you know, here, 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 and just like tapping them, like quickly, you can quickly release something.
Wow, interesting.
So it's really fast and effective, and you know, it's a kind of no-brainer in terms of its protocol. Anyone can learn that. The only thing we would say is, once you embark on tapping, finish it off. I mean, don't leave anything like half done, because you are affecting the energy body. Right. So if something is up for you and you start tapping it, finish it, clean it. Otherwise, you'll find, you know, the energy body is out of balance. So it's not like, you know, so a lot of people like have a discipline of saying, okay, this is up. I'll give it a rating 1 to 10. How severe is it? Right. And then they'll do a round of tapping and then revisit. And then say, okay, it's 5 now. And then, so, you know, you can bring it down to like zeroize it. It's just one way of working with that system. That kind of vanilla EFT, right, has evolved in a lot of different ways, because we quickly learned, and this was taught by Gary Craig in the 80s, that, you know, you can apply EFT, for instance, to post-traumatic stress disorder. And the recent studies cited in the book show that it was able to knock down PTSD in a series of rounds of tapping. Wow. Which no other therapy is capable of achieving. You know, that's amazing. So the clinical studies are there, they're in, and this has been known actually since the 80s, when Gary Craig treated Vietnam veterans. He went to one of the, and he filmed the whole thing, you know, tapping down their war traumas, you know, and it's been known for the past 40 years. Right. And yet it seems to have had no effect whatsoever on institutional psychotherapy.
Right. Well, things like that make me very suspicious. It's sort of like, is there a motive? I mean, we can say, is the pharmaceutical industry that, you know, they can't sell pill if they're making you take a pill every day and there's a motive on health. I mean,
like EFT, vanilla EFT is free.
Right.
Just get on YouTube, and there's thousands of how to do it. Gary Craig puts all his training free online. Right. And I mean, it's just a no-brainer. So what we have found in practice is therapists and psychiatrists and doctors coming to us for training in these techniques. Okay, and then they just go off and do it. Okay. So we think more in terms of integrative medicine now rather than alternative, you know, because there's like an overlap. Like psychotherapists have this eye movement desensitization, EMDR technique. Well, if that's not meridian based, I don't know what is, right? And that is mainstream. You know, and on the other hand, you find now entheogenic use for people in terminal states, for people with certain chronic mental disorders. So again, there's like a flow between cultures going on in the medical area, but of course the medical orthodoxy hasn't changed so much. The practitioners and the way people approach it has changed. Right. Okay.
I think even now, I think that in like Western countries, a lot of insurance will take acupuncture and other what they call alternative means, right? Like they accept those, whereas I think not even a decade or two ago it wasn't. You know,
and more informally, you find Reiki practiced in hospitals increasingly, especially in recuperative care, you know, pain management and that kind of thing. Dr. Mehmet Oz is one of the heart surgeons who developed the minimally intrusive surgery. You know, he doubles up high tech cardiosurgery with Reiki.
Wow, that's amazing.
You know,
Yeah.
so again, people just recognize it works, and there's a good reason why it works. Actually, we can talk about that briefly. Why not?
Oh, for sure, for sure.
Since we're just flowing on with this thing.
Right,
so,
right. No, that's good. I'm curious though, for EFT, one of my listeners had a question. What are some good resources if somebody was, they hear what you're saying, they're very fascinated, they're interested. Where would you recommend someone to, read?
Go to Gary Craig,
Okay.
Gary Craig's website he's got two major techniques, and one is still gold standard EFT.
Okay.
And, there's also ACEP, which is the Association for Comprehensive Energy Psychology. This is Dawson Church's organization. They're providing training courses all the time. Okay. And ACEP is good if you're a professional in the healing business, okay? Any kind of therapist. ACEP has resources to support people who are full-time carers and therapists and so on. Okay. So that's a good professional organization to get involved with. So yeah, Gary Craig or ACEP. They're both excellent resources. Visit them both.
Okay. That's great. I can link that in the show notes. That's a good idea. You also mentioned
one thing I'd like to add to that, if I could, Ryan.
Oh, go ahead.
I just wanted to finish on this thing with EFT is not only did we recognize how effective it was, we also, following Gary's example, did what's called surrogate tapping. Okay, this is where you tap yourself for somebody else's problem.
Okay, interesting.
Okay, and that works.
Wow, that's interesting.
And then you can imagine tapping yourself for your own problem without actually kinetically doing so. And that works. And you can imagine tapping for someone else without actually tapping. And that works.
Oh, wow. That's quite
okay. So people can experiment with all this stuff themselves. But what you find yourself drawn into now is an understanding of reality which steps away from the materialist model into what I would like to describe as panpsychism. That's to say that consciousness is a distributed feature of reality.
That's something you talk a lot about, the non-local field.
Atemporal nature of the field.
Right.
So what we're saying is that consciousness and reality are kind of bound together and have these non-local atemporal properties. And that is distributed everywhere. So this paradigm makes sense of a lot of stuff that you encounter in energy healing that cannot be made sense of from a materialistic, traditional worldview. And it accounts for the strangeness that people have to encounter as they step into, for example, the cases in the book.
Right.
They'll find the conflict between the materialist underlying framework for understanding world and reality conflicting with this one. Right.
And a lot of it is at the same time, I mean, you could read something like that and be skeptical, but then if you actually experience it, there's so much difference between reading something and I don't know, that doesn't make sense logically in my brain. I can't understand it. Whereas once you experience it, it totally opens up a different door.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's why we put so many cases into the book, because they shaped our experiences over this quarter century, those cases, shaped our understanding.
Right.
So to write the book really was about getting that out there so that, people could look at actual cases of healing. Sorry. I just brushed a control. I don't know if that showed up. Sorry about that. And that was the prime reason for writing the book. So it's obviously going to stimulate skeptical thoughts because it stimulates skeptical thoughts in us as the people who had those experiences.
Right.
Because I had hardcore training in philosophy, analytic philosophy and formal logic. That's my background. Everything in there says no.
Right.
This cannot be, right?
Right.
So we like walk this tightrope between skepticism and belief, and yet we can't deny what we've seen and experienced ourselves. Okay,
Oh,
so
no,
everybody's going to have to deal with that watershed, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
You
Oh,
stay
definitely
on the safe side, and you look over the wall and say, that's all magical thinking, that's all nonsense.
Sure.
Or you cross over the other side and you become part of a different community. But what we try to do is walk the line between these two, because we're always looking to back up the cases, the experiences we've actually had, as somehow rooted in a deeper reality. Sure. So it's not anti-materialist. It's a kind of greatly expanded notion of materialism, which includes a lot more sentience. So, you know, kind of pulls towards animism. That's to say, the attribution of personhood to a lot of things that we wouldn't normally, or haven't been taught, have or possess personhood. You know, and that's another of the kind of directions that we feel ourselves moved through working with energy.
Yeah, sort of a kind of a shamanistic approach to healing and to seeing reality as not just materialistic, but comprised of different energy frequencies and perhaps even different entities, which you talk about as well in the book as well, right?
Yeah, I think shamanism is a good way to frame it. You know, that is the kind of meta model, so to speak. Right. You know, and it's one of the most enduring in human cultural terms, you know, cross-culturally and in time depth. So I guess we're coming back to the best of that, so to speak. But carrying all the kind of skeptical and scientific apparatus with us. Sure.
Right.
So we're looking for a higher level reconciliation and merger, essentially. I think it's imperative because the materialist mindset that's dominated the last, 300, 400 years has led us to brink of extinction right now. Right. Okay. So I think only through reconfiguring our views about the nature of reality, nature, personhood, do we have a chance of stepping back from a kind of shareholder view of the world.
I like how you phrase that.
You know, it's just a resource. It's an externality on your accounting sheets. You know, it's someone else's problem. This kind of extractive, okay, our shareholder value is simply the, you know, to an extent, a stakeholder view would help to ameliorate that. And I certainly urge that. But I think we probably need something far beyond it at this stage. Sad to say.
Right. Well, yeah, sad to say. I mean, I think pretty much anybody on the planet Earth right now who lives connected to the internet would feel the same way. Like we're just, I mean, how many people don't feel like we're just slamming into a wall or driving off a cliff? There's so many imminent disasters. And as you mentioned, the way of viewing the world doesn't seem to lead to somewhere bright, like you said, right? Like sort of taxing. How much can we make, you know, in a world that's driven off of, you know, just profit and short-term.
Extractive, you know.
Right, exactly.
So we really need to look at like conservatorship of some kind.
Sure.
But I don't know quite what shift has to take place for that to happen. But I hope books like this are part of a much larger wave. Gordon White's recent Animistic, for instance, was excellent as well in, you know, urging a look at reality from a different perspective. I think we just have to keep hammering away with this and hope that, you know, finally, culturally, humanity makes the shift.
Right. No, definitely. That's one thing I definitely liked about your book is it is aimed more at making the world a better place and you know, your community a better place, rather than, you know, what can I get out of this? And I mean, there are things, obviously you can get a lot out of it, healing yourself, you know, using the techniques to enhance your life. You get quite a lot out of it, right? Better quality of life.
That's very important.
Yeah, for sure. Better quality of life, and things along those lines. But also, how can we make the world a better place? How can we use these techniques to sort of divert disaster, really, like a collective disaster, right? Yeah.
Well, I think one of the things that's helpful with that is the notion of a displacement away from the immediate persona to a wider sense of personhood. Mm-hmm. And I can share a slide with you on that topic, if that's okay with you.
Oh yeah, that'd be great.
If I could only find it. Sorry about that, Ryan.
No, it's fine. It's fine. Mm-hmm.
It is around.
Whiteboard. Let's see.
Did that come up? No.
Not yet. You might need to hit. Did you hit share screen?
Yeah.
Okay.
Gonna have to edit this out, I think.
Yeah, it's okay. I can always edit later, so don't worry. Yeah. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. When I hit the share screen, a window comes up, but that slide is not in there.
Oh, okay. So there we go. Okay. Yeah.
Is that up?
I can see a folder, so I think you might need to click one of the images in there.
I did, and that is showing itself.
Or try minimizing. Yeah, try minimizing. There you go. I think if you minimize that, it should come up. Oh, no.
Okay, it didn't work. Fine. I've been having a lot of problems since Zoom also did an update. Just previous podcast I did, it did a large update, and I couldn't get the share to work at that time. So I haven't figured it out yet, so I don't know what the heck. Anyway, what I wanted to say there is that we are pursuing a much broader notion of personhood.
Okay.
Whereas, you know, like the contemporary view is that you have like your present moment awareness and your kind of unconscious, and then you have your kind of deep unconscious, and that's it basically. That's but through energy healing, we also realize that we have an area called the perinatal. That's to say the experiences in the womb and during the birth process are also a part of our extended personhood, and that beyond that, on quite a few occasions, treating emotional issues in the present lead to traumatic memories of death in previous lives. Okay, so this is also part of our inheritance, so to speak. Okay, and then beyond that, experiences within a familial context that we're not directly involved in also influence our emotional life. Okay, and then beyond that, in the ancestral field. Okay, so the traumatic events in those deeper fields of consciousness, which have a connection with us, but no literal biographical timeline that we can discern, nevertheless affect us in the day-to-day life.
Sure.
And, you know, the way this was really driven home to me was by attending family constellation therapy. Okay. I just went along as an observer. And what you find is there's a therapist there, there's a couple of people who want that therapy, and there's a small group of people who are there as participant observers, let's say. It's a group of strangers, essentially. And the person who wants the therapy will select people from that group to represent key members of their family. Place them in the middle of the room in relationship to each other, that kind of emotionally you know, model the dynamics of that family. So they're facing each other, facing away, far apart. And what's interesting is you can put people onto this space, even though they're long dead and gone.
Oh, wow.
It doesn't matter. Okay. Now, the experience you have is if you're selected to represent somebody's relative, whether living or dead, is that when this constellation is formed in the middle of the room, you're fully aware of your own thoughts, feelings, sensations, but you suddenly have access to an overlay of thoughts, feelings, and sensations that are not your own. Okay. Then the therapist can come round and interrogate you about those. Are they, calm? Are they angry? Are they frustrated? Whatever. And what you're doing essentially is reconstellating the emotional life of a familial or ancestral network so that you can recode it.
Okay.
Okay, so the energy that comes into play, and you can feel that energy when the constellation is formed, provides a gateway to the broader field of consciousness.
Okay.
And within that broader field of consciousness, you access the familial and ancestral depths connected to this person's day-to-day emotional upsets in the here and now.
Wow. I like that. That's much expanded map that people never really consider, I mean, I think ancient cultures, ancient cultures
Bert Hellinger developed this technique, Ryan. He did it from his experience in South Africa with Zulu tribes people.
Right.
So it comes from that almost shamanic culture, transported to Germany and then modified with Western psychotherapeutic concepts for the resolution. And we have family constellation therapy as a result. So, it's really looking to our deeper past, to a more connected past, and then hauling that technology into the present for us to use. Okay, so anyone can go along to family constellation therapy and experience this for themselves. I'm not asking anyone to believe.
Right.
Doors open there, you just go along, as a participant observer. I think in a lot of places there's a fee for somebody undertaking the therapy, and there's a much smaller fee for anyone who wants to participate as an observer of these events. You may get chosen to represent a family member or not. The level of energy in these events depends a lot on who's doing the therapy.
Okay.
So like most things, there's like a spectrum. Like you have very formal psychotherapy on one end of it. And on the other hand, you have more freelance people who are psychotherapists, but they have more shamanic kind of approach to things.
Okay, that's great.
You just find, practitioners who your personal style is comfortable with.
That's really good. I think it's not only is it good because you can experience, healing and emotions that you probably didn't know about, but also, as you mentioned, it really expands your view of what yourself is, so to speak, right? Like more of experiencing interconnectedness of yourself with other people, with your family, your tradition, your ancestors. So that sounds really amazing.
It also does one other thing which I never or would never have imagined. That's to say that most of those ancestral emotional problems have a distinct ethical nature. Okay, they're about injustice of some form in the past that's affecting people now.
Very interesting.
Okay, so our relationship to money, power, wealth, and so on seems to be influenced by what has happened in our familial and ancestral line. Okay, it's not all just in our hands. Okay. So this deep persona that we are part of is affected by ethical conflicts in the past. So essentially what you're saying now is that the field itself has an ethical dimension to it. Okay. And that you can, so to speak, resurrect that ethical conflict and you can resolve it through forgiveness, and you can recode the field on a higher emotional note.
Okay. Wow, that's beautiful. Very beautiful.
Okay, so you're actually kind of now the question here is, if this field is atemporal and non-local, of course, then it allows this kind of change. But if you change it now, and now is only a relative position in a largely atemporal pool of consciousness, are you therefore changing the past?
It's a good question.
From a healing perspective, it doesn't matter, because the healing is always now. It's always someone, you know. But, you know, from a kind of metaphysical point of view, is it possible to reharmonize a planetary field of consciousness, for instance, with its accumulated traumas? And by doing so, how would you change that planetary trajectory, its evolutionary path towards a higher order of harmony? I know these are some interesting metaphysical questions that arise through energy healing.
Sure. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. It's sort of, if we have this personal trauma that obviously is stemming from somewhere in the past, or other, other interpersonal connections, then also expanding that to the earth and seeing, the collective trauma that perhaps we have caused the earth, or as perhaps even as a species, right? Oops. Uh-oh. It froze for a second.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's okay now. It's okay. But yeah,
interesting.
Said something about unstable, but the fact that us as a species throughout our history have also impacted the earth in such traumatic ways as well, especially in recent history, right? And so even as you mentioned, going back and taking the necessary actions now, but then also seeing it in a more nonlinear way, right? Where healing can occur through, recollection or recognition of perhaps actions or behaviors of the past, but then also readjusting our perception and our behaviors to right now, and changing things right now as well, I think. Okay.
In fact, there was a recent paper in quantum mechanics that dealt with, well, some part of this, but it was the suggestion that on a quantum level, the entire universe is a self-simulation, an evolving self-simulation.
Sure.
And that idea is very much in accordance with what we're saying now, actually.
Right.
So that seems to suggest that the onus is upon each of us to contribute towards this recalibration of the field, the larger field, through our family, through our personal consciousness, our personal unconsciousness, familial and ancestral field. We're harmonizing our part, okay, but we're also changing the nature of the larger field itself into a far more harmonious and evolutionary positive note.
Yeah, very fast.
Kind of reversing the tide, so to speak. So that may well be a kind of semi-spiritual path in which healing work has a much broader dimension to it. Okay.
Makes sense. Yeah.
That's how I've come to see it anyway.
Yeah, sure. I think that a lot of people who may be interested in healing or occult practices might initially be interested in it for themselves, what they can get out of it, or short-term benefits. As you mentioned, I forgot what term you used earlier, but like the shareholders viewpoint or something along those lines, right? But ultimately, it's like, if these techniques or abilities or practices can't ultimately change our community and the planet and potential disasters that we're facing, then what good are they really, right? I mean, really, that's my view.
It's just a perspective that has emerged out of doing this amount of healing work. you know, and then being exposed to the practices of other healers as they go about their business, you know. So for me, it was like an emergent worldview. I didn't start off with, I'll say, my professional training in philosophy, analytic philosophy, doesn't exactly set anyone up for this kind of expansive thinking, you know.
Sure.
3 years of formal logic.
Right.
Okay.
That's
So,
interesting.
Yeah. But yeah, these are the foundations for this worldview. Yeah. And I say anyone can go off and undertake the relevant disciplines, you know, attend those types of events and see for themselves, basically.
Oh, all right. Okay, so one thing I really liked about your book is you have a lot of charts, right? And so I found that very useful when you're exploring new realities and concepts to chart them out. And I thought it'd be really cool if you can share one of the charts that you've came up with and kind of share a little bit about the concept and how you came about, why you find charts like this useful as well.
Yeah, well, the chart that's in front of you right now is not in the book, strangely enough. I developed it later to help people to understand this field of energy healing. And what I've done with the chart is identified 5 of the major areas or approaches to energy healing: meridian therapies, breath-based therapies, mind-body interactions, hands-on healing, and what I've called direct interventions in the field. And then, you know, there are others that could be added. I mean, this chart could be infinitely larger. You know, I haven't put in, for instance, the somatic body-centered approaches. Then there's like movement and dance, and it goes on, you know. But what I've tried to do is select those energy healing techniques that are pretty well accessible to most people in most towns and cities around the world, and which have a path so that you can not only experience them, use them for yourself, but get trained in them and possibly have a pathway into healing for yourself through them. So I'll try to put the most accessible techniques here. And just like quickly going around the circle, meridian therapies, we've talked extensively about emotional freedom techniques as like a gateway technology for getting into energy healing. As I said, it's the fastest, easiest, most effective meridian therapy technique available today.
Okay.
And there are a lot of alterations and enhancements and different schools of thought around it, but the core technique is still going strong. It's often called tapping. A lot of people know it under that title. Alongside there, I've added acupressure, which is a more refined approach to meridian therapy without actually stepping into the medical field of acupuncture. Simple acupressure techniques that can be learned. And beyond that, magnet therapy has had a lot of interest in recent years. You know, there are a variety of magnetic tools that you can use and roll them on parts of the body that are afflicted. To kind of release the blockages to the flow of energy. So on the breath side, I've given 3 breathing techniques there: integrative, rebirthing, and holotropic. And what I can say is that they are on a scale of intensity. Breath work generally is intense. Okay. Emotional freedom techniques is not intense, but it requires that you have a clear and present focus on your disturbance. It doesn't have to be intense, but you have to have a connection with it. Okay, it's very important. So for people who are articulate about what they're thinking and feeling, EFT works very well, but the danger is they shouldn't slide into reliving the trauma. Okay, it's not about intensity. It's just about having a connection and then releasing it through the use of the technique. Breath work, however, the integrative breath work.
I have a question. Sorry to butt in. I have a question. When you're talking about, you had mentioned it's not about fully reliving that trauma or fully re-experiencing it. However,
Yeah.
do you, to some degree, do you need to at least experience it a bit, or maybe at a a lighter level of it? Do you
Yeah,
think?
a lighter level is the correct, way of thinking of it.
Okay.
We're not asking anyone to like dive into the past here.
Sure.
And a lot of emotional problems will have a physical presentation. Okay, like persistent back pain, lower back pain. There's a classic.
Sure.
So you don't need to get deep into the emotions underlying that. That physical presentation is quite sufficient. You tap on that, and whatever comes up, you tap on that, you're clear, and you're always clear 100% each time you start doing a round of tapping. Okay, that's very important to do. Zero eyes. But the whole process can be light. Doesn't require any heavy emotional lifting to be going on over there. In fact, I can say this about it. If you've got really intense emotion coming out, it makes the technique far less effective.
Okay.
Okay.
Interesting. Okay.
Because all it is, all these traumas and negative emotions are minor disturbances in your energy field that over a period of time will manifest as physical or, even as illness. Okay. But the underlying problem is a very subtle one in physiological terms. It's this blending of consciousness and memory and the meridian system. So you're dealing with something which is even beneath the surface of current biomedicine. Okay.
Okay.
Biomedicine cannot see this deep down.
Sure.
There's been a couple of studies in Korea, by the way, in which they've begun to examine the energy pathways as part of the biosystem. We've got the first evidence that they've actually identified candidates for the energy meridians. Okay.
Interesting. Yeah.
But this is at a very deep level of our biology, So as I say, it's not even visible to Western science at the moment.
Sure.
Okay. So when we're dealing with EFT, you need very light touch on the underlying problem. And the understanding that most physical presentations have an underlying emotional issue, and there may be aspects that you need to deal with as you go along. For instance, was there a particular taste or smell or sight connected with the originating trauma? You may want to separate and isolate those things and deal with them as well. Anyway, that's part of learning how to do EFT. Okay, so the basic protocol is tapping those meridians. It's dead easy. But there's a lot of refinement comes. The difference between somebody just starting out and somebody like my partner, Kenzie, who is doing deep, deep work with these techniques is huge,
Sure.
And you can see that from the cases in the book, she's doing real emotional heavy lifting stuff. Right. Which is going right back into the womb, past lives, deaths, Okay. So we were at the breath-based therapies.
Right.
And what I was trying to say there is most of the breath-based therapies are on a scale of intensity.
Yes.
Okay. So the integrative breath work has a far more pronounced element of mindfulness as part of the breathing. Whereas you get to rebirthing breath work, which I specialized in, it's really full on energy. Okay. So the breathing, the circular breathing that we do with rebirthing brings the body's inner energy to peak within the space of like 10, 15 minutes flat. And when I say peak, there's so much energy in the body. You have an event that's known in yoga, I think, is the breath retention. Okay, you're so saturated with energy, you stop breathing for a short period. Okay, and then it resumes again. So rebirthing breathwork has that intent. So it's not for everybody. If you're not into intensity, then rebirthing breathwork is probably not for you. If you're into intensity, then, you know, you need to not to go full hog on it.
Right.
Now, the reason I'm saying that is that although you love intensity and it brings stuff up and clears it without having to go through the process of remembering it or telling anyone about it, it's inarticulate. So it suits those people who are not able to articulate their underlying issues. They have a kind of a broader sense of malaise in their life. Okay, can't quite put their finger on it. It's like things are just always out of tune, out of sync with others, with their work, with their money, with responsibility, with authority. Sense of malaise and of not having achieved your potential. Okay, then the breathwork based techniques are going to give you leverage over that for the first time in your life. You need to think about doing 6 to 10 sessions. That said, each session is like 30, 40 minutes max. That's it. You don't want to do more than 1 or 2 sessions in a week. Because when you're pitching your energy body up to this level, where you actually have breath suspension and then back, that's an enormous amount of clearing. And you need a detox after you've done that. You need to flush the toxins out of your body. You drink a lot of water, you get yourself well grounded, you eat well. Give your system the opportunity to reset and then go for another session. Now, the reason I was saying that you shouldn't go full hog on with the intensity of this is that there's always a danger of re-traumatization. That's to say, after like 10 sessions, all of a sudden, you had huge progress. Stuff that, you know, used to bother you just isn't on the horizon anymore. It just like disappeared. But on the other hand, you know, you may have a resistance to re-entering the process of doing this. Okay, that resistance comes from being exposed to too much intensity for too long. So so whenever I was facilitating rebirthing breathwork, I always made sure that the level of intensity the person was working with kept to a certain level so that they could come back for subsequent sessions and then integrate the breathing technique into the circular breathing into their day-to-day lives. And again, you know, that's the thing with all the energy healing modalities. I always try and emphasize the ones which you can integrate and empower yourself with. Okay?
Yeah, that makes sense.
It's really important, you know. So finally, holotropic breath work. This was, you know, like rebirthing breath work was developed by Leonard Orr. It was almost accidental that he discovered that. But he went along to the Esalen Institute, you know, which is like one of the centers for transpersonal psychology in the world. And he taught it to Dr. Stanislav Grof over there. And Grof, a research psychiatrist, had taken it on board and intensified it. Okay, with really long, drawn out, high energy circular breathing, connected with a lot of like shamanic sound and drumming. And of course, the people were having very intense experiences. And, you know, it was through the holotropic breath work that Grof realized that people had memories of the birth process, of trauma within their birth process or within their time within the womb. That was affecting their subsequent lives. And because he was also a medical doctor, of course, as a psychiatrist, he was astounded because his whole training had said to him, there's not sufficient brain tissue at that stage in life for people to have memories. Okay, but there they were.
Interesting. Yeah.
So that was one of the ways in which, you know, transpersonal psychology at least started to break through the boundaries of the kind of small persona you know, and of course the other one we talked about earlier, Bert Hellinger's work in Africa, and then his subsequent development of family constellation therapy, you know, which all of a sudden opened the deep familial and ancestral past as a causative agent in day-to-day problems. Okay, so anyway, all of that is in the book. Moving on to mind body. I put mindfulness there. I guess everybody by now knows what mindfulness is. You know, it's basically a development of Buddhist vipassana meditation, secularized, you know, and in 100 varieties, flavors.
Right.
Just, you know, whichever flavor suits you. It's for me, it's kind of a discipline. It's a wonderful discipline to have, to be able to sit in the moment and just be there with it. Okay, Vivation was developed out of mindfulness and rebirthing breath work by Jim Leonard. I took professional training with Jim before he passed on. He developed Vivation as a very gentle use of breath work to raise any disturbances within the energy field into visibility, and then use mindfulness to digest them.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, so Vivation is a really nice, you know, easy, it's a sophisticated approach to things, you know. So I say the breath work element of it simply raises the underlying issues into awareness, and then you use mindfulness to digest them.
Okay, interesting. So it's sort of it's sort of a combination of the previous breath work and mindfulness. Okay.
Yeah, in a sense, it's a bit like going back to the integrative breath work we talked about. Generally, integrative breath work has a far higher energy component. In Vivation, the energy component is just enough to bring something into your awareness that's discordant. Okay. Okay. The small, it could be a sound out in the street that's irritating you. Somebody revving a car engine. Okay.
Right.
That's enough. That sense that there's a discordant element in your field of awareness, and then you use mindfulness to accept, acknowledge, and integrate it.
Gotcha.
It's a really useful skill.
Yeah, it does. It does. It's actually the first time. Most of the other terms on the chart I'm familiar with besides this one, so it's interesting to hear about it. Vivation, I haven't heard of this one.
Yeah. And then there's EMDR, you know, which is, we talked earlier, it's more like a professional's technique, but it's widely practiced now amongst carers and psychotherapists. So it's kind of their alternative to EFT.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, that's how I think of it. I think EFT is more effective personally, but anyway, hey, it's there. Hands-on, obviously, Usui Reiki. And what a lot of people don't know who haven't lived in like Central Asia or the East is that hands-on healing is pervasive, like from Istanbul to Tokyo.
Sure.
Right across, you know, Central Asia and the Middle East. Hands-on healing is well known. The Usui Reiki is just one flavor of it. And I emphasize Usui Reiki because that's the lineage I have. And I know it's Usui Reiki because it has a lineage.
Sure.
Okay, there's a lot of things called Reiki today, but I don't know what the lineage is. I don't know what the source of the energy they're using is. So, you know, I just want to emphasize that point. I know my lineage right the way back to Mikao Usui.
Okay, he's the founder
I'm like 3 or 4 levels beneath Mikao Usui, you know, most modern practice. I got my Reiki initiation through William Rand over in the States, you know, the major figure.
What are some techniques that, so Reiki is something I've heard so much about, but I don't really know the details of it. I know, as you mentioned, it's a hands-on healing technique, but what are some of the methods they use? And I've heard they use like symbols and different things along these lines. Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, the thing started out dead simple.
Okay.
And then it was elaborated by people after Usui pretty well. Mikao Usui was, you know, basically he was a Tendai Buddhist. You know, he's doing a lot of inner energy work and meditation. And then one day he said, like a Satori, this thing just came, descended on him, and he found that he could heal. So on the practical side, the range of healing energies exist as part of the electromagnetic spectrum. They're in the extremely low frequency range of the electromagnetic spectrum, so we can measure them. Between 0.5 and around 60, 70, or 80 hertz or cycles per second is the healing range of energies. Okay, so each part of our body generates an electromagnetic field, and whether it's veins or viscera or, you know, bones, they all have an electromagnetic signature. So if you play back to your own body a signal which sweeps through that range, and it can be a mechanically generated electromagnetic wave between 0.5, 80 hertz cycles per second, it will tend to restore your body to health. Okay, so that's a known medical speciality. It's called pulsed electromagnetic frequency, PEMF. And so typically they'd have like a blanket with the electrical wires through it, and the person breaks their arm or leg, you could wrap that round, you play this sweeping wave, and it kickstarts the healing process and speeds it up, essentially. Okay, so that's like the physical part. The hands of Reiki healers, indeed all energy hands-on healing, emit the same frequency range, 0.5 to 80 hertz cycles per second. Okay, so that's like the physical end of it. The difference is that the amplitude of the waves emitted from the hands of, for instance, Reiki or yoga or Qigong hands-on healers is up to 1,000 times larger than the natural. Okay, and that's where the the super fast energized healing effect comes from, the acceleration that comes from that amplitude, even though it's within a very natural range of frequencies. Okay, so that's the bottom end of the hands-on healing thing. That, you know, that's the mechanics part of it. Where does Reiki come from? Okay, it's spiritually guided energy. What does that mean? It means exactly what it says. Let me say one thing though, you don't have to believe anything to be able to be an effective hands-on healer or Reiki healer. Okay, you can just get the initiation and you're good to go. If you get the initiation, I always recommend you spend first 10 days, 2 weeks practicing intensely on yourself. That's the easiest thing to do. But literally, you know, whenever you have a spare moment, you put your hands on. If you're watching TV, you put your hands on. And the reason is that you need to build confidence that you're channeling this energy. Okay, that, you know, for most Westerners, or, you know, most of us coming from academic or practical backgrounds, beginning to work with this stuff is, again, a bit like crossing that watershed from one worldview to another. So you know, you really do need a good dose of confidence to be able to, say, offer hands-on healing to somebody else. Sure. So you start with yourself, and in that 10-day period, you'll apply the energy to yourself and you'll detox, drink a lot of water, try and not to drink alcohol, try not to eat red meat. You know, you try and purify your energy body because you're also cultivating a channel. And the cleaner the channel, the stronger the energy comes. Okay. Right. So that makes sense. In the space of a week, your hands should be buzzing. Okay. And then, you know, that energy is available for yourself, for those people around you, for pets. You know, animals can see the energy in your aura very clearly. You know, I've had dogs just come up to me, you know, and like turn over and show their belly, you know, they've had an operation or something. And they know that the Reiki will very quickly relieve their discomfort. Wow. So I'm practicing day and night. You know, as an author, my eyes take a hammering off the monitor. Oh yeah, I'm sure. So I apply Reiki to myself before I get up and before I sleep. I clear all the discomfort in my eyes. You know, and the proof of this was, you know, many years ago, I went for, you know, to an optician, I got glasses, and then it was years later, I revisited that particular optician, and by chance they had my records on file still, you know, so they did another scan, and then they compared the digital images. And he said, you know, for a man of your age, you know, and I'm getting on towards 70.
Right.
He said, this is impossible. Your eyes are better now than they were 10 years ago.
That's funny. That's hilarious.
Short of, what's happened? What's this?
Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah. And there's a case in the book, actually, of Kenzie's mother who treated her liver disorder and the clotting factor in her own blood. You know, and it did what no medicine could do. That's to say, restore the platelets to a level which, you know, they should have been.
Sure.
Yeah. So, you know, this persistence, this clean channel is all about Reiki. What does it mean to say it's spiritually guided? I'm not going to say anything except spiritually guided means spiritually guided. And, you know, if you can step beyond the materialist worldview, you'll find that, you know, we're actually in a very multidimensional reality. Okay. And that includes beings, positive and negative. But it also includes the notion of higher order beings. Higher order in the sense that they're on a higher vibrational level. So they're largely invisible day to day to us, but, you know, under certain conditions, they can make themselves visible. And this feeds into the whole question around the higher yoga tantras, the Vajrayana tradition of initiation by a deity, which this used to be common in Europe. The old mysteries were just this, you know, mysteries of Dionysus, the mysteries of Eleusis, Samothrace, you know, all these great centers of the mystery tradition offered initiation into a deity, which of course now is in the Indo-Tibetan tradition, is still a living tradition.
Right.
You know, so that's a whole other discussion.
Sure,
let's keep going. We'll never get around this circle.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
Hands-on bioenergy. I would distinguish healing somebody hands-on with your own energy from Reiki. Reiki, you simply channel it. Your own energy doesn't come into it. So we always say to Reiki practitioners, you don't have an engagement with the outcome. The outcome is not your responsibility.
Sure.
You just step forward and you offer yourself as a channel to the energy, and however it is for that person is however it was meant to be. Bioenergy, however, is purely using your own inner energy. So typically in Eastern European countries, bioenergy is a medical speciality. They would study 3 or 4 years. And of course, you need to know how to cultivate high levels of inner energy and replenish yourself. After you've seen maybe 2 or 3 clients in a day, that's enough. You don't do more. You then need to spend a day or 2 to replenish your inner energy. Otherwise, you're going to get sick yourself.
Oh, that makes
but
sense.
Bioenergy is there. That's another hands-on. And finally, therapeutic touch is, you know, you don't come across it very much, but it's very popular amongst carers. You know, I'm not quite sure what the source of the energy is. It sounds to me like it's a gentle version of bioenergy. I say it's a more occurring touch. Okay, so that's on the spectrum anyway. For finally, what I've called field interventions. Mind connection healing is what Kenzie is doing, and there's a number of examples in the book. What she does is implant a healing instruction into the energy body. When that's done, any issue that comes up on any plane, you simply invoke that instruction and it releases the problem there and then. So the advantage of mind connection healing over, say, EFT is you don't actually have to start doing physical tapping or something. You can, you know, so you're using the field essentially to clear the field with mind connection healing. Okay. And Kenzie is teaching that. If you want to learn about it, just go to mindconnectionhealing.com. You'll learn all about it. She's running online classes and everything. So
nice. Great.
Family constellation therapy, we talked about extensively, and you know, that requires some degree of professional training, but I felt it was important to put it over there because there's so much to be learned.
Sure.
And, you know, for a lot of people, the problems they have in life, I think the case in the book is a woman who had this persistent fear for the health and well-being of a child. Which wasn't anchored in any aspect of her experience or her mother's experience or, you know, the family or their circumstances.
Right.
And, you know, just didn't seem to be susceptible to any of the techniques that she knew. Okay, so she went along family constellation therapy to really interrogate the field. Ask the question of it, you know, what's the source of this? And it turned up 7 generations deep, I think, a series of losses of a child in childhood.
Oh, wow.
Okay, so that had been transmitted through the women of her line. It was affecting her day-to-day life. You know, she had that fear, and yet it was kind of unaccountable on any obvious measure. So there's an example of like deep work that really answers a question. Sure. Yeah. Finally, I put spiritual healing there because this is really back to the roots. You know, shamanism is essentially spiritual healing. It's healing through a set of entities and beings who have an ongoing association with a certain lineage and make themselves present for healing purposes. So it's like the core of shamanic healing over there. Right. It's the practice today, you know.
Right.
Well, that was it. That was my round the circle, instant guide to energy healing world.
Right.
Okay, let me stop.
Yeah.
Doing this.
So many different techniques to utilize, you know. So that's
it's vast.
Yeah,
we didn't even get into the somatic movement-based techniques.
Sure. You know, yeah, you have a whole plethora of things to choose from.
Yeah. So it's really, I just urge everyone, you know, just select 1 or 2 techniques that really appeal to you and go and experience them, learn them, especially techniques that empower you to do this stuff yourself, for yourself and for others. You know, just get on it. It's, you know, it's just my perception of the modern magical and occult world is that it has shifted too much towards the literature of the occult, too much to historical aspects of that, and not enough to the ongoing healing. You know, I had made a roundel about shamanic healing, actually. I don't know if I could just share that with you.
Oh, that would be great.
Possible. Is that there?
Let's see. Oh, yeah. Yes.
Okay, so what I did with it, I did this years ago, actually, for some totally unrelated reason. I started thinking through the roles of shaman and what they actually do. And I figured out there was like at least 5 major areas in which most shaman that I knew cross-culturally were active in, you know, like divination, healer, intermediary between worlds, sorcery itself, always an aspect, and the seer, this, you know, looking deep into the future. And when I looked at this, like 80% of this has to do with healing in one form or another on a community basis.
Interesting. Yeah.
So, you know, this is like the real core of all magical traditions are kind of rooted in this. And yet, if you look at modern occultism, the element of healing within it seems to have withered away.
Right, I agree.
That's why I'm trying to say that, like, with modern occultism, there's been a kind of loss of significance and meaning through a loss of community engagement in the healing process. That is absolutely central to shamanic work.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we have.
I mean, I don't know if you want to spend time on this, but I just want to put it up as an illustration of what I was trying to say.
No, it's very interesting. Here you have in the healer, you have absorbing and releasing illnesses, pulling out illness, and applying healing energy. One thing that was interesting in your book, which it intuitively made sense to me, and I've always thought along those lines, and I think ancient cultures have. You mentioned that when people have traumatic experiences, oftentimes entities, whether good or bad, can sort of latch on to the person who's having or who just had a traumatic experience. So maybe you can share a little bit about that, maybe your experience with that and what techniques are utilized in order to clear out, entities that are attached to somebody.
Okay. Yeah, we need to distinguish between voluntary and involuntary possession, of course.
Sure.
Voluntary possession is like clergy. And that points again towards the mystery traditions and the Vajrayana, Indo-Tibetan Yoga Tantra. Okay. So involuntary possession is quite rare in energy healing.
Okay.
The cases are not that often. The very rare ones can be very disturbing. The more common one is, for instance, someone who's had an operation, comes out of hospital and has a persistent ache or pain and never quite, heals properly. And what we found is that they may have been subject to an attachment when they were under anesthesia. So what in acupuncture terms is known as GUI, that's to say the fragments of someone who's recently died, has attached itself to them. So, a lot of people die and they don't know they're dead, or they die in a panic and they're trying to survive in some way. But let me say about possession, a lot of possession isn't evil. It's not like The Exorcist, right?
Right.
What it's like is parasitism.
Right.
Okay. It's entities who are often just in the wrong place. Like the tiger in your bedroom isn't evil. It's just, shouldn't be there.
Right.
Okay. So, a lot of this stuff about entity possession has this parasitic nature to it. Okay. It's like entities are drawn towards the kind of life energy we emit, a bit like moths to the,
right, light, like when you go camping.
So they can carry on a vicarious existence.
Record. Okay, cool. All right, we'll pick up where we left off. So a lot of times you're mentioning it's sort of parasitic in nature, and that.
Sorry, Ryan, can you enable my screen share?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, we're good. Okay, cool.
So I'd just like to show this diagram. Yeah, you're seeing okay?
Yes.
Okay, so this is an illustration from one of the acupuncture journals, actually. Discussing this problem, this issue within acupuncture of these what's GUI or etheric astral complexes attaching themselves to the etheric body and drawing energy off. Okay, so it's a beautiful illustration. I was given permission to use this. So moving on from there, that's one level of entity attachment, and then there's like entities of place, in the sense, like, how to say this, certain buildings or landscape features seem to be at the juncture point of energy disturbances that allow an interpenetration of worlds.
Okay.
Okay, so what you do get is phenomena reported over considerable periods of time connected with those places.
Interesting.
Okay, so a real interpenetration of worlds. On occasion, that can be parasitic if you're spending too much time there. Okay, it's important just to realize that, okay, so the mechanism is often through the dream space that you'll become aware of these entities. I don't know, certainly in my case, I'm very much aware while I'm dreaming, if there's something occurring outside the dream space or while I'm dreaming. So then I become aware that I'm dreaming, and the dream images tend to pop like little soap bubbles, and you become aware of the entity itself. Okay.
Okay.
But oftentimes these entities are capable of clothing themselves in imagery drawn from your unconscious. Okay, so they can make themselves look attractive to people. And, you know, there's like hundreds of years of classic succubus incubi type phenomena associated with this. And specifically, they're drawing off energy. And the easiest way to do that is through sexual activity.
Okay.
So they're actually capable of a level of physical interaction whilst deceptively clothing their true nature and intent as though they're part of a dream.
Interesting. Okay.
Okay, so there's a case like this. I documented it, and it's on my academia.edu site. It was kind of disturbing, so I thought it more appropriate to put it there.
Okay.
It was important to document it and make it available to healers. Okay, they should know. You know, it's called Lord of the Flies.
Okay.
The phenomenology of a possession.
Okay.
Okay, and I strongly urge anybody who suspects that the case is one of possession, involuntary possession, to be very careful. Don't think that you're capable of dealing with it.
Okay.
That's my advice.
Okay.
There are entities out there which are so parasitic, they can cause more damage to the healer, There has to be, in other words, you need the intervention of some higher order being or a healer who is working with higher order beings to deal with this, because it's on another plane and it's creepy.
Okay.
So like the classical stages of possession are infestation. That's to say, waking up with some, strange smells in the house. A lot of things are getting broken. Things are, like knocked over, and this kind of activity going on. And that escalates to what we call oppression, second stage, which is when you like wake up with cuts and bruises on your body that unaccountable. And the third phase is obsession, where now the entity is that close, it's starting to become part of your energy system. Okay, and it may be doing that through as I said, a sexual motif. Okay, and the fourth stage is full possession. That's to say, the loss of the persona for a period of time as the possessing entity takes over. So they're the four classic stages of possession. So ideally, knowing the stages, you can gauge where they're up to. And just a personal observation on this is that I often feel that there's a deeper cause for anyone having a problem with an external entity like this. There's something in past lives. It's that deep connection is resurfacing in this life. Maybe they have pledged themselves to a set of entities in a previous life. Okay, in exchange for XYZ, whatever. So, for all those people engaged in occultism, they need to realize that the entities they're dealing with do not have end stops on your birth and death. they don't see that as a limiting factor on any contract or agreement.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And when you're out of physical manifestation,
Mm-hmm.
you're not anchored as much. You're much more susceptible to them, actually.
Mm-hmm.
So when you come into incarnation again, you have this physical anchoring, but you still have the pestering influence of these entities. And it's unaccountable in this life because all our memory is gone, isn't it? You know, that
right.
That's like, hey, I'm here for the, brand
right.
spanking new. And what's this stuff going on?
Okay.
So a lot of possession cases has this sense of, weirdness around it. What's that about? What's that for? And I think in the case that I documented, it was a case of somebody being sacrificed in a previous life to a set of entities.
Oh, wow. Okay.
That gave them permission, sense of ownership, And this is also, these cases are extremely rare. I'm not trying to freak anyone out. They're really rare.
Sure.
This is not stuff you bump into easily. And
Okay.
it's often, my knowledge of it is through other healers as well. It's not just my personal experience. I can think of 2 cases in quarter century,
okay,
which strongly, manifest this type of. Some of them, as I say, the entities in question are often too powerful to deal with.
Okay.
So my insight then is that there needs to be a spiritual process here.
Okay.
This person needs to take ownership of their situation and stop, this is unaccountable. This is, why is this being done to me? What, sure. They need to have a more holistic vision of where they are. And they need to start thinking, okay, what is the nature of this relationship? What am I contributing to this? Sure.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
So, yeah, it's not just like, you bring the priest in, he does exorcism and
it's all over from there. Yeah.
But it can be really frightening stuff. There's no doubt about that as well. And when you interface sometimes between worlds, the effects can be physiologically devastating.
Sure, definitely.
There was one case which it wasn't possession, but let me just mention it. I don't know if it's in the book even, but it's a very strange case. A very close friend of ours, she was a Reiki teacher and everything. She's at home one day, she's doing something in the living room, and she hears like noise. It sounded like it was coming from the corridor. Like it sounded like somebody got hold of a door and slammed it with all their force, And as that happened, these figures manifested in the living room in front of her, passed through and disappeared into the kitchen and were gone. And this happened, I think, twice more. She'd never understood what this was about. She didn't understand who these figures were. They're like black shapes, But it's like there was an interleaving of dimensions. But she lost all her hair.
Oh, wow.
It never grew again. And it was clearly profoundly traumatic for her. So, yeah, on the interface of these dimensions, there's like energies invoked, which are, very strange, beyond our range, like vibrationally weird.
Sure.
And that really leans into this whole phenomena as well, which Stanislav Grof was also one of the first people to take note of. It's the alien abduction phenomena.
Right.
Okay, so doing holotropic breath work, people were not only surfacing apparent memories in the womb and their birth process, but also of having been abducted by aliens.
That's very interesting.
So Dr. John Mack was the head of psychiatry at Harvard Medical School, right? And he went across to the Esalen Institute. He met Stanislav Grof over there. And Grof said to him, like one psychiatrist to another, John, you want to check out these accounts? People, they're saying they're abducted by aliens.
Right. Right.
you know, and taken off, and the accounts all have like a common descriptor. Same stuff, you know, the white room and the operation and the removal of sexual reproductive material from the body, and then blah, blah, blah. So John Mack took this seriously. He did a 10-year longitudinal study of people suffering post-traumatic stress disorder without an originating stress. There was no trauma in their biographical timeline whatsoever. And he subjected them to a battery of psychological tests, examinations, and interviews. He documented all this over really a decade or so, and then wrote it all up and published it.
Interesting.
And then Harvard went crazy.
So you can't be publishing this kind of wacky out there stuff.
They went mad. They brought in a committee to investigate him and investigate his science.
But all of these accounts were post working with the holotropic breathing method. These memories all surfaced post working with that.
Then when you start looking, you find that a certain percentage of any population has this memory.
Right. I've heard that before. Yeah, that's interesting.
So, you know, it's you know, it's one of those, it's a bit like the UFO phenomena. It's you know, it's like there, but hey,
I've always wondered
over our head.
Right. And what's the line between, you know, like we were talking about spiritual entities or extra dimensional entities and UFOs, you know, that's always very blurry to me. Is it the same thing? Are they,
I think blurry is a good descriptor.
Yeah, exactly. You know, are they, it's hard to define.
I think the difference is my sense is that there are higher vibrational entities.
Yeah.
Okay, there's lower vibrational entities as well.
Certainly.
And there's other dimensional.
Interesting. Okay. How would you describe other dimensional?
Literally that they're like us. Except they're interceding across dimensional boundaries somehow.
Okay.
Now, as far as I know, only string theory posits lots of extra dimensions, right? 50, 60, it depends on the flavor of string, you know.
Right.
If they are large dimensions, and that might well be the reason for the black energy, dark matter, dark energy phenomena. Okay, that might be an explanation for that. Then they are real worlds, which just don't quite mesh with ours, but which may have evolved sufficiently to develop technology to allow them in some form to either cross themselves or to send kind of replicant-like figures into other dimensions to do specific tasks.
Sure.
Okay, and one of those tasks appears to be the manipulation of human reproductive material for whatever reason, the collection of it.
Right.
You know, we don't know. Beyond that, we just don't know. Nor do we know who is piloting, if they are piloted or not, the so-called UFO phenomena.
Right.
You know, so again, you've got craft which appear to be able to, you know, not only stop on a dime and accelerate beyond anything we know, but to appear and disappear at will, change shape, configuration.
Exactly.
You know, so it's almost like some kind of interdimensional machinery is at work there as well. You know, they're like slipping in.
Right, they're moving in and out between dimensions.
Yeah, you know,
making weird angles and weird.
Yeah. So, you know, one of the things I noticed is in certain dream states, you may encounter entities, okay? But they never have a clear shape or form, just my observation. You know, it's like there's a form there, but it's like vibrating. So you can't quite catch, you know, what it is.
Not solid. Yeah, it's always moving.
It doesn't resolve into a clear issue. So it looks like you're looking at something which has some aspects to its vibrational nature or its dimensions, which doesn't quite accord with our psychological framing of experience, right? The way we linear and three-dimensional, you know, the way we are structured to make sense of things. You know, all of this stuff exists on the boundary with that.
Right.
So there's severe problems with epistemology and therefore with ontology.
Right.
That's to say what you can know and what there actually is.
Right.
Become highly indefinite.
Right. No, absolutely. So you said we were talking about otherworldly, and then you also said multidimensional. How would you distinguish that then? The multidimensional beings are more fractal in nature, existing.
No, I think we're talking about gods.
Okay.
So, you know, like, for instance, in the higher yoga tantra, you have a series of entities who offer an initiation that confers an experience of enlightenment.
Yes.
But it's momentary. Okay, you don't have the energetic, psychophysical development to prolong that experience. Like, it tapers off over time. But at least then in your spiritual practice, you know what you're like aiming for.
Sure.
You know that there's, like, you know, some lives, hence there's the possibility of getting closer to that.
The seeds are planted.
Yeah, exactly. So certainly in Plato's Phaedrus, that was seen as joining the entourage of the deity that would affect all subsequent incarnations. You know, that was the desirable nature of it. And it was kind of associated with the foundations of civilization itself, because that's like looking up the evolutionary tree and saying, right, I'm actually a part of this. Okay, I'm down here right now with all this, you know, gross matter, but I'm part of that, at least in some part, you know, and I'm connected to it now. So irrespective of life and death, and however death comes, there's always that. So, you know, the ability to confer that initiation is coming from a higher order being. So, for instance, you know, the great initiations like the Kala Chakra, or you know, the others, there can be 500,000 people there.
Right.
But they all get it.
Right.
It's not like, you know.
Yeah.
So, you know, that, and you know, the tantras itself talk about when this initiation was first given, the orders of being who attended, where, like, the humans were one, you know, in a little corner, and there were like 100 other orders of being attending the initiation. Okay, this is the big view. And the other side of this is, like, when you consider the Dzogchen, which is within Buddhism, but it's not actually any part of Buddhism. Right. Okay, so the tradition says this was a system of spiritual development practiced on 13 or 14 other worlds before it was brought to this one by an enlightened being called Garab Dorje. And then it's taken within Buddhism and held, but it's not of this planet. Right. Okay. So these, you know, the universe starts getting really big, but it also is populated with an underlying evolutionary and spiritually positive trajectory. Sure. Okay. I think that's important to bear in mind, especially like times like these, you know, when it seems impossible to imagine such a thing. But, you know, this is a small, tiny bubble of time, you know, in a much larger one. Yeah, no doubt. It seems like communication breakdown is a big problem now too, with social media and just the ultra polarization of society and echo chambers, and you know, people can come together and communicate and heal and work together. That seems like that would solve a lot of the problems, honestly, right? Yeah. That's why I'm urging everyone to pick up one or two of these techniques and master them. You know, if all of us do a little, then job gets done. Right. Absolutely. You know, but it requires all of us to step forward and say, okay, I'm going to move out of into a position of leadership effectively. You know, so I'm always like trying to say that, you know, the persona is too narrow a platform on which to establish meaning in life.
Mm-hmm. Sure, for
Okay,
sure.
can only do it on a transitory basis.
Mm-hmm.
And it's always lost again and then needs to be refreshed. So, but when we move into a position of leadership from I to we, to think of community and our participation and what we add to that, we're in a larger sense of self, So we generate meaning, because meaning isn't there to be found.
Right.
It can only come from us through our acts, through our actions, what we do, what we commit to.
Right.
So yeah, all it requires is all of us to do a little.
Absolutely. Yeah, thanks for sharing all your techniques. I'm curious, one last thing is that there's so many different techniques. Somebody might look and get overwhelmed. Oh my God, which one to choose from, So is it, would you recommend someone to go with what, just experiment, or go with what they're intuitively drawn to? As far as
intuitively drawn to is so important, because that said, just for their own self-management, it doesn't take more than a few minutes, of time to learn and practice EFT.
Okay.
What I would say is that in most people's emotional lives, there's 2 or 3 emotional issues which are the real disruptors of harmony and success. Okay, there's generally not more than that, maybe just 1 or 2. So we like, by analogy or metaphor, we think of them as the tall trees in the forest, they're sticking out. You chop those ones down and everything thereafter is easy peasy. Okay. So, if you feel that you can do that, great. If not, go along to a experienced healer and just get rid of those couple of things. Learn the technique as you do that, so that you have a double benefit. And that's going to probably open the doors as much as they need to be open for you to just go forward and reconfigure, reconstellate all your relationships in life.
Oh, great. That's wonderful. Okay, so I'm actually running out of time here, but I wonder if you have any final thoughts, and also are there any upcoming projects, books? Also, maybe you can share where people can find you. I can share that in the show notes as well.
Yeah, there's always tons of stuff going on.
Right.
I'm at petermarkadams.com, but it's like an author site. So, my past projects are over there. For healing, Mind Connection, healing.com. I would urge anyone who's interested, anyone who's read the book and has seen Kenzie's work, drop her a line. She's running the online classes. It's just like a weekend. You'll learn the technique, and she will deal with 1 or 2 of those tall trees during the course of the training. Okay. She'll do it for you. It's all included. Okay.
Oh, perfect.
So that's, from point of view of writing, we have a book announced already by Scarlet Imprint.
Oh, excellent.
Okay, which is going to be called Hagia Sophia, Sanctum of Kronos.
Okay.
And the subject matter is spiritual descent in an age of tyranny.
Okay.
Okay. So in that book, I go back to the mysteries of Eleusis as they were closed down in the end of the 4th century, and how the initiatory tradition was picked up and moved to Athens and continued there for the century and the century after. And how, as Christianity suppressed this Hellenistic spiritual tradition, the architects of Hagia Sophia, who were from that tradition, encoded the building structurally and from its interior design with the Hellenistic vision. So it's also a detective story as I solve the clues in the mystery of the architecture itself.
Wow, that sounds fascinating. Is that why you're currently located in Turkey?
Well, I've been inside of the building for 30 years.
I had been there. I went there.
Have a lot of opportunity to examine it.
Oh, for sure, for sure. It's definitely a sight to see. I mean, I was there God, it must have been 2 years ago, I guess. It was,
Yeah.
yeah, it was the end of 2020, I think. But it's amazing. But now it's, it became a mosque. It's like one of the major
Yeah,
masjids, mosque in Islam.
it's in Moscow, so you don't have to pay to go in.
Right. It's
But
unbelievable, beautiful.
building is the building,
Right.
They took all that scaffolding out, so you can now see it.
Yes.
The only problem is they covered the floor with a carpet, so we lost the marble. That's all.
Okay.
Apart from that,
Okay.
So that's scheduled. We finished the editing. It should be in design this month, and they'll announce when it's available this summer, hopefully, fingers crossed.
Okay.
What else? Well, there's research going on the mysteries of Mithras.
Okay.
In terms of the ritual process they enacted. And that's one project. We're looking at more work on healing issues. So that's going on.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I'm also doing the literature. Of course, like prose poetry is published by Cobblestone Press in Reliquy.
Okay.
Literary journal. I have that going on. These podcasts and mainly research and writing. Actually, since the pandemic, we had to close the office down, so everything we do now is just like online.
Okay.
So I'm also thinking of developing a healing course for online. We'll cover some of the material we talked about today.
Yeah.
Maybe 3 or 4 modules, try and push through this material. And that's it.
Yeah, I think people would really like that. I mean, people love taking online courses, and they might hear this podcast and be very interested, but it's kind of interesting too, because some people might be less what would you say, less prone to doing something like this in person. But if they can see it online, right? Oh, I'll give it a shot, whatever, it's online, right? They might be even intimidated, perhaps. I'm sure there's many like that, right?
Yeah.
And then they do it online. Okay, these are some simple techniques I can experiment with. They get the experience, and then they might even not only deepen their practice, but might actually pursue doing something in person as well. You know what I mean? So it could be a very good catalyst, so to speak.
Yes, absolutely. So that's a kind of schedule for sometime in the coming months.
Sure.
Start that process, probably during this summer.
Okay, cool.
I don't know if I can get to the UK. I don't know if there's going to be a book launch. It's been, last one was, when was that? Must have been the autumn of 2019, just before the pandemic started. So it'd be lovely to get back to, that side of things as well. Let's see if that will happen.
Yeah. Well, that's great. Scarlet Imprint puts out amazing books. Just the quality of the material. Yeah, it's a very high quality press. So looking forward to that. Definitely.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Great. Well, yeah, maybe, it looks like we're running. It looks like Zoom's going to cut us off in a second. But, well, it was great. It was a pleasure to have you on, and thanks for sharing your story and the different healing techniques. And I hope that a lot of the listeners get inspiration to check it out. And I'll include all the links to Kenzie's website, and definitely your website and your material in the show notes. And hopefully maybe we'll have you on another time when your next book comes.
I'd love to. It's been a pleasure talking with you.